while she was stealing my money. I was signing a brand new trust, one that locked her out forever. My name's Linda Brooks, and I never thought I'd be telling a story like this. Not at my age, and certainly not about my own family. For most of my life, I believed that if you raised your children right, with love, with stability, with decency, then they'd take care of you the same way one day. That was the unspoken promise of family, wasn't it? You pour your best years into them, and when you're older, they pour some of that care back. Well, that's what I used to believe. I'm 62 now. A retired accountant, widowed for 8 years. My husband, Mark, passed from a heart attack one quiet morning in June, coffee still warm beside him. I thought the world ended that day, but somehow life just kept going. The house stayed, the bills kept coming, and the mornings still asked for coffee. After he was gone, I sold the old family home and moved into a smaller one closer to my son, Evan, and his wife, Tessa. I told myself it was to be near them, to watch their little boy grow, to be part of their lives. Truthfully, I just didn't want to be alone. At first, everything was good, comfortable, Sunday dinners, family laughter, birthday candles. Tessa would bring over lemon bars and say, "You shouldn't be eating alone. Mom." And I'd smile because she called me Mom. And that meant something. But over time, the sweetness started to taste a little sharp. It was in the little things. How she'd say, "You're so cute when you forget where you put things," and laugh. How she'd take my mail to organize it, and somehow I never saw it again. How Evan stopped asking me about my finances and started asking her to help Mom with her accounts. I brushed it off. I told myself it was kindness. Modern families work differently, I thought. And if Tessa wanted to help, let her. Maybe it was my pride making me suspicious. Still, something inside me stayed alert. See, before I was a wife, a mother, or a widow, I was an accountant. Numbers don't lie. People do. It started on a Sunday evening in May. We were having dinner at their place. Evan grilled steak. Tessa poured wine. The table was picture perfect. White dishes, linen napkins, candles flickering soft gold light. Halfway through the meal, Tessa smiled that tight, polite smile of hers and said, "So, Mom, we've been talking, and we think it might be time to simplify things for you." I put my fork down. "Simplify?" She nodded like she was about to discuss a recipe. "You've got all these accounts, right? Investments, insurance, your pension. It's a lot to keep track of, especially now that you're retired. We just thought," Evan cut in gently, "we just thought maybe we could help. Handle the bills, automate payments, organize your accounts. You don't need to stress about it." I looked between them. The words were polite, but something about them felt staged. "I'm not stressed," I said, half laughing. "I've been balancing books since before you were born, Evan." Tessa chuckled like I'd made a joke. "Of course. But times have changed, Mom. There's so much online now. All those security codes and digital authorizations. It's just safer if we help." Her tone was syrupy. Too sweet. Evan reached across the table and touched my hand. "We just want you to relax, okay? Let us take care of things for you." I smiled, but inside, my chest felt tight, because that was the first time anyone had ever said to me, "Let us take care of things." And the way they said it, it didn't sound like love. It sounded like a plan. That night I couldn't sleep. I walked around my house, staring at framed photos. Evan at 10 years old, holding a trophy. Me and Mark at our wedding. Little Ethan's baby picture. It all looked so safe, so permanent. But something about that dinner bothered me deeply. Maybe it was how Tessa said, "We've been talking," like I wasn't supposed to be part of the conversation about my own life. Maybe it was how Evan didn't look me in the eye after. I remember whispering into the dark, "Mark, if you were here, what would you say?" And I swear I heard his voice in my head, low and calm as ever. "Watch the numbers. Linda, always watch the numbers." A few days later, I noticed a small change. Tessa started dropping by more often, just to help tidy up. She'd collect the mail, stack it neatly, then slide a few envelopes into her purse. When I asked, she said, "Oh, just junk mail, Mom." Then she suggested we modernize my finances. "Everything online is easier," she said. "You just need to give me temporary access so I can help." I hesitated, but Evan reassured me. "It's fine, Mom. She's just linking things together so we can keep an eye out for fraud." I laughed. The irony almost made me choke. Fraud, but I let her. Because she was family. Because saying no to your own son feels like betrayal. Still, that night I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and typed in my bank password. Incorrect password. I tried again. Incorrect, and again. Invalid credentials. Froze. The same screen I'd logged into for 15 years suddenly didn't recognize me. I stared at that little red error message until the letters blurred. Something inside me shifted that night. Something that had been sleeping since Mark died. I realized the world can take your husband, your peace and your body's youth. But the moment it takes your independence, it takes you. So I made a quiet promise to myself, right there in the dark. I'd find out what was happening. I'd smile when they smiled, and I'd play the fool, just long enough to learn the rules of their game, because if they thought I was old and slow, they were about to learn what old and wise really looks like. The next few weeks moved like a slow fog, thick, quiet, and disorienting. I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe I'd mistyped my password. Maybe the bank updated their system. The rational part of me kept making excuses, while the deeper, older part of me, the part that survived a husband's death and 3 recessions, kept whispering, "Pay attention." Linda. So I did. I started noticing things. Small things, like how my phone notifications for certain bills stopped appearing, or how envelopes from my insurance company suddenly had forwarding labels, or how Tessa's visits became routine, each one ending with some new suggestion. "I'll handle that for you. Don't worry about those forms. You've got too much on your plate." Too much on my plate? I hadn't worked in 6 years. What plate? One afternoon, she came over wearing her usual polite armor, a pastel blouse, perfect makeup, and that smile that never quite reached her eyes. She set her tote bag down and said brightly, "I brought the updated financial forms from the bank. They need your signature on some new digital authorizations. Standard stuff." I wiped my hands on a dish towel and looked up. "Digital authorizations?" "Yes," she said, tapping on her tablet. "Everything's electronic now. It's just easier for everyone if I link the accounts to one dashboard. That way Evan and I can help you manage things together." I hesitated. She sighed, like I was a stubborn child refusing to eat her vegetables. "Linda, we just want to make sure you're safe. There are so many scams these days." That word, safe, was becoming her favorite. She turned the screen toward me. "Here, just sign right there." I took the stylus, and as my name scrawled across the glowing glass, I caught a flicker of triumph in her reflection. It was quick. Blink and you miss it. But I saw it. That little satisfied curl at the corner of her mouth. My stomach tightened. That evening, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea and watched the sun dip behind the maple trees. My thoughts felt tangled. When did kindness start feeling like control? When did help start feeling like theft? I kept replaying her voice in my head. "We just want to make sure you're safe. Mark used to say the most dangerous people are the ones who smile while they take from you." A week later, I went to the grocery store and my debit card declined. I tried again. Same result. The cashier, barely 20, looked at me with that polite pity that slices deeper than cruelty. "Do you want to try another card, ma'am?" Ma'am. That word hit harder than it should have. I paid in cash and drove straight home. When I opened my mail that afternoon, I found a notice. "Account access limited due to authorization update." Authorization. The same word Tessa had used. I called the bank. After 5 minutes of robotic prompts and hold music, a man's voice finally answered. "Yes, Mrs. Brooks, I see your account here. The access change was processed last week. The trustee on file, your son, approved the new security protocols." I froze. "Trustee?" "Yes, ma'am. According to our system, Mr. Evan Brooks is the primary trustee on your account, and Mrs. Tessa Brooks is an authorized co-signer." My heart pounded in my ears. "That's impossible. This is my account." "I understand, ma'am. But the documentation we received shows you signed the authorization." I felt the air leave my lungs. The authorization, the signature on that screen. My hand shook as I ended the call. For a long while, I just sat there in silence. Staring at my reflection in the dark window, they'd done it. Quietly, cleanly, with a smile. The next time they visited, I decided to test the waters. We were sitting in the living room, little Ethan playing with his blocks on the rug. I said casually, I tried to access my account online last week. It says Evan's the trustee now. Isn't that strange? Tessa looked up from her phone. Oh, that's just a technical thing. The bank sets it up that way for convenience. It doesn't mean anything's changed. Her tone was smooth, practiced. Evan nodded. Yeah, Mom, don't worry about it. It's just to make things easier if something ever happened. If something ever happened. I smiled. Well, I suppose that makes sense. Something inside me twisted like a tightening wire. That night, I opened the drawer in my desk where I kept my old financial folders. I started going through them. Tax returns, insurance policies, property deeds. Each page felt like proof that I still existed. Then I noticed something missing. My last 3 pension statements. Gone. I checked the filing cabinet. The same. Whole months of documents. Gone. That's when the anger finally came. Not loud, not messy, cold, sharp, controlled. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect. About being erased. I thought of my mother, who died at 72 with her checkbook still balanced to the penny. She used to say, "A woman who doesn't watch her own money won't get to watch it for long." She was right. The next morning, Tessa called. "Hi, Mom. Just checking in. Did you get your prescriptions refilled?" "Yes," I said evenly. "I did. Oh, and I noticed some old papers missing from my filing cabinet." There was a pause. Then that cheerful tone again. "Oh, I tidied those up for you last time I was over. They're in our home office now. Easier to keep everything in one place. Everything in one place under her roof." I forced a laugh. "You think of everything, Tessa," she giggled. "That's my job." When we hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone in my hand. Then I whispered to myself, "No, sweetheart. Your job is about to end. I used to believe every storm announced itself with thunder. But this one came in whispers, polite ones, dressed in soft smiles and good intentions. It was a Wednesday afternoon when they came over. Evan and Tessa, together, which was rare during the week. I should have known something was coming. They brought pastries from that bakery downtown, the one I loved. That was their pattern now, sugar before the sting. "Mom," Evan said as he set the box on the counter, "can we talk for a minute?" I smiled. "You don't need to bribe me with eclairs, dear." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It's about planning for the future." Ah, there it was again. The future. The word they always used when they were about to rearrange my present. Tessa chimed in, her voice syrupy smooth. "We just want to make sure everything's in order. You know, in case something unexpected happens. It's not about control, Mom. It's about protection." I said nothing. Just waited. People always reveal themselves if you let silence do the work. She pulled a folder from her tote bag. "It's called a living trust. It's very common for seniors. Evan and I did a ton of research. It'll keep things simple if there's ever an emergency." I raised an eyebrow. "Seniors?" She blinked, feigning innocence. "Well, I just mean, it's smart for your age bracket. You wouldn't want to burden anyone later on." Burden. Another one of her favorite words. Evan jumped in before I could respond. "It's just paperwork, Mom. You'll still have everything in your name. We'll just handle the logistics," Tessa finished for him, smiling wide. "You won't have to worry about a thing." I took the folder, slowly flipping through. Legal jargon, clauses, pages of words designed to confuse even the sharpest mind. "Who prepared this?" I asked. "Oh, just a friend from my work," Tessa said casually. "Her husband's in estate law. He helped us draw it up." I looked at her. "So, not my lawyer?" Her smile tightened. "We just wanted to save you the trouble. You can show it to whoever you want, of course." "Of course." But she said it like she hoped I wouldn't. Evan leaned forward. "Mom, you trust me, don't you?" And that was the line that pierced me. Because once, long ago, when he was 8 years old, he came running into my office crying because a classmate stole his lunch. He looked up at me with those same blue eyes and said, "You'll always protect me, right, Mom?" And I did. Always. Now those same eyes were asking for something entirely different, permission to hold the knife. "I do trust you," I said softly. "I just want to read everything carefully. You know me. I like my numbers tidy." Tessa laughed, but it was sharp. "Oh, Linda, you're so funny. It's just a formality. Nobody's trying to take anything away." That word again. Take. She was the one who said it, not me. Funny how guilt leaks through language. That night, after they left, I sat at my dining table under the yellow lamplight, glasses perched on my nose, reading every page. The deeper I went, the heavier my chest felt. There it was, paragraph 7C. Successor trustee shall assume management and disposition of all accounts and properties in the event of incapacitation or at the discretion of the trustee. At the discretion of the trustee. Meaning, whenever they decided I was too old, they could take control. I pressed my hands together to stop the shaking. I'd spent my entire career protecting other people's money, ensuring no one got taken advantage of. I thought I was safe from that kind of betrayal, at least in my own home, with my own blood. But that night, I realized something chilling. Thieves don't always wear masks. Sometimes they wear wedding bands and call you Mom. The next morning, Tessa dropped by, just to see how I was feeling. She brought coffee. "You looked tired last night," she said, voice dripping with concern. "I didn't sleep much," I said. "Been reading. About the trust?" I nodded. She smiled tightly. "Well, don't overthink it. It's really for your protection." There it was again. That word she loved like perfume, protection. "You've said that a lot lately," I replied. "What exactly do you think I need protecting from?" Her smile faltered. "Oh, Mom, you know how things are. Online fraud, phone scams. I was an accountant for 35 years, I interrupted gently. I taught fraud prevention seminars. Silence. Then she laughed nervously. "Of course. That's why we trust you. We're just helping you stay on top of things, that's all." She leaned in, tone soft but firm. "Evan worries about you, you know. He says you've been a little forgetful lately. Forgetful." That word hit me like a slap. I stared at her for a long moment. She looked away first. "Well," I said, smiling, "thank you for worrying. I'll think about the papers." When she left, I waited until her car disappeared down the street, then picked up my phone and dialed Julia, an old friend, now a retired lawyer. "Linda," she said warmly, "what's going on?" "Julia," I whispered, "I need you to look at some documents for me. Something doesn't feel right." Her tone shifted instantly. "Bring them over tonight." So I did. And when she read through the trust, her eyes hardened. "Oh, Linda," she murmured, "they've written themselves into control. If you sign this, they can legally move your funds, sell your assets, even restrict your access for your well-being." I felt sick. Julia squeezed my hand. "Don't sign a thing. Not yet." The next evening, Tessa called again. "Hi, Mom." "Just checking in. Did you sign those forms?" "Not yet," I said, keeping my tone light. She sighed. "It's really important we get this done before the end of the week. Otherwise, we'll have to redo everything." "Then redo it," I said softly. A long silence. Then, in a voice just barely sweet enough to pass for polite, she said, "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "Linda," I smiled into the phone. "That's what makes life interesting, dear." That night, I stared at my reflection in the mirror, the wrinkles, the silver strands, the eyes that had seen too much to ever be naive again. They thought I was weak. They thought I was losing track, but I wasn't losing track. I was taking notes. And when the time came, I'd make sure they knew exactly what it felt like to be handled. I woke up early the next morning, the kind of early that comes from worry, not rest. The light was gray, soft through the curtains, and for a moment I could almost pretend nothing was wrong. But then my eyes landed on that stack of papers on the kitchen table, the so-called trust. Tessa's words echoed in my head. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." That tone. That quiet threat tucked inside a smile. I decided to check things for myself. At 9:15 sharp, I drove to the local branch of my bank, the same one Mark and I had used for decades. The teller, a young man named Kyle, greeted me warmly. "Morning, Mrs. Brooks. How can I help you today?" "I'm having trouble accessing my accounts online," I said, sliding my ID across the counter. "I just need to see the balances and make sure everything's in order." He typed for a moment, then frowned. "What is it?" I asked. He hesitated, a flicker of discomfort before he spoke. It looks like there's been a recent authorization change. Your son, Evan Brooks, is listed as the primary trustee now. That means you'll need his approval for full account access." My heart dropped. "I'm sorry, what?" He nodded, scrolling. "Yeah, it was updated about 2 weeks ago. Everything seems to have been processed properly. Maybe check with your family?" Check with my family. That phrase burned worse than the news itself. I took a slow breath, forcing calm. Can I at least see the last few statements? He looked at his screen again. I'm afraid those are restricted under the trust. Only the trustee can authorize releases. I stood there staring at him. My money, my accounts, and I suddenly needed permission to see them? When I finally found my voice, it sounded foreign. Thank you, Kyle. You've been very helpful. He gave me a sympathetic smile. The kind that says, you poor thing. And I walked out of that bank feeling smaller than I had in years. The air outside was heavy with summer heat, and everything looked a little off. Too bright, too loud, too false. I sat in my car with my hands gripping the steering wheel, shaking. It hit me all at once. They'd already done it. They hadn't needed me to sign those new papers because they already had what they needed. My signature from one of the earlier forms, twisted into something else. And I, the woman who once audited multi-million-dollar portfolios, had been tricked in her own kitchen. That night, I called Evan. He answered on the second ring, his voice casual. Hey, Mom, everything okay? I went to the bank today, I said. My voice was calm, too calm. Oh, yeah? Did you sort out the login issue? Not exactly. They said you're the trustee now. Silence, then a nervous chuckle. Oh, yeah, that's just for convenience, Mom. You know, in case of emergencies. In case of emergencies, I repeated. Like if I forget how to count? He sighed. Mom, please don't start. Tessa and I are just trying to help you. We don't want you to worry about all these things. All these things, I echoed. You mean my life? There was a pause, then his tone softened. That old, gentle voice I remembered. You've done so much for us, Mom. Let us take care of you for once. If he'd yelled, I might have fought back. But it was the kindness, the rehearsed, guilt-wrapped kindness, that broke me. I swallowed hard. You know, Evan, I always thought control and care were two very different things. Mom, I have to go, I said, and hung up before my voice betrayed me. The next day, I found a letter in my mailbox from the insurance company. It was addressed to Trust of Linda Brooks, trustee, Evan Brooks. That was the moment it became real. I wasn't just being helped anymore. I was being handled. My entire financial life had been repackaged into something that no longer belonged to me. Tessa showed up later that afternoon, unannounced, as usual. She had that chirpy brightness in her tone that made my skin crawl. Hi, Mom, I was just in the neighborhood. Thought I'd stop by. I gestured to the letter in my hand. Were you also in the neighborhood of my insurance account? Her smile faltered, then she laughed it off. Oh, that. It's just paperwork, Linda. You worry too much. You seem to think worrying is a weakness, I said. But worrying is how people like me survive. Her expression hardened for just a second before she smoothed it over again. You should enjoy your retirement. You've earned it. Let us handle the boring stuff. The way she said boring stuff made my jaw tighten. Boring stuff like where my money goes? I asked. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway, toward my study, where I kept the rest of my documents. Why don't you let me look over those old papers for you? They're outdated anyway. I stepped closer, meeting her eyes. No, Tessa, I think I'll hold on to what's mine. There it was, the first crack in the mask. Her mouth twitched, and for a brief, satisfying moment, I saw the woman behind the performance. Cold, calculating, cornered. Of course, she said lightly. Whatever makes you comfortable. But as she walked to the door, she glanced back at me and smiled that thin, poisonous smile. You know, Linda, you can't do this all alone forever. The door clicked shut, and her perfume lingered. Sweet, suffocating. That night, I sat in my living room, staring at my late husband's portrait above the fireplace. Mark had been the quiet type, the kind of man who could fix anything with patience and a wrench. He used to joke, "If anyone ever tries to fool you, Linda, make sure you let them think they're winning first," I whispered. Looks like it's time to use your advice, honey, because I wasn't going to fight them head on. Not yet. They thought I was confused, fragile, out of touch. So I'd let them think that. I'd smile, nod, and hand them whatever rope they needed. And when the time came, I'd make sure they used it to hang their own plans. That night I barely slept. The house felt colder than usual, too still, too hollow, like it knew something was wrong. Every tick of the hallway clock reminded me of what had been taken. By morning, I'd made myself a promise. If they wanted to treat me like I was powerless, I'd remind them exactly who they were dealing with. But I couldn't fight them in the open. Not yet. I needed proof, something solid. I made a list on a yellow pad. 1. Bank accounts. 2. Insurance policies. 3. Property deeds. 4. The lake house. That last one made my stomach twist. The lake house was more than property. It was where Mark had proposed, where Evan learned to fish, where we'd buried the family dog under the birch tree. It was my heart, and now it was probably just another asset in their new trust. I had to find something they couldn't touch. After lunch, I went down to the basement. Dust floated in the sunlight like tiny ghosts. In the far corner, beneath old boxes of holiday decorations, stood a small iron safe, the one Mark had bought 30 years ago. It hadn't been opened since before he died. My hands shook as I knelt and turned the dial. 3, 17, 24, click. Inside were old papers, a few photo negatives, a velvet pouch holding my mother's wedding ring, and a worn brown envelope labeled L. Brooks, Confidential. My breath caught. I recognized Mark's handwriting. I sat on the floor, tearing it open carefully. Inside were copies of financial ledgers, property deeds, and a document titled Preliminary Trust, Revocable, dated 10 years ago. His name. My name. Joint ownership. I flipped through the pages, heart pounding. It wasn't a finished legal trust, but it was detailed, proof of Mark's original intentions. It clearly named me as the sole beneficiary of all property and liquid assets if anything ever happened to him. That meant something. It meant that any transfer made after his death, any update, could be challenged. I wasn't powerless. I had leverage. I called Julia that evening. I found something, I told her, voice shaking. An old trust Mark made. My name's on every asset. Good, she said immediately. Keep it somewhere safe and make copies. That document might save you. Save me? Yes, she said. Linda, from what I've seen, your son and daughter-in-law have already committed financial exploitation. It's not just unethical, it's criminal. The word criminal hit me like a slap. I wanted to believe Evan was innocent, that Tessa had talked him into it, twisted things the way she always did. But deep down I knew better. You can't forge someone's name, reroute their accounts, and smile through it without knowing exactly what you're doing. Julia, I said quietly, I don't want to destroy my son. I just want my life back, she sighed. Then we'll do this carefully, quietly. The more they think you're harmless, the more mistakes they'll make. That night, I made a plan. First, I made 3 photocopies of the trust and hid them in different places, one in my attic behind the insulation panel, one inside a hollow book on my shelf, and one, the most important, in my purse. Then, I took photos of the bank letters, the insurance notice, and my signature on that tablet screen. I saved everything to a flash drive and tucked it inside the coffee tin where I kept sugar packets. Every precaution Mark had taught me over the years came flooding back. Document, duplicate, disguise. It felt strange, preparing for a war against my own child. But sometimes love means protecting yourself from the people you love most. A few days later, Tessa dropped by again, cheerful as always. I brought you some groceries, and I cleaned out your mailbox for you. Of course she had. She started unloading bags while I stood in the doorway watching. You don't have to do all this, I said. I'm not helpless, she laughed. I know. I just like taking care of you, that word again, care. Every time she said it, I could almost hear the chains rattling. Speaking of which, she continued, Evan was wondering if we could have the deed for the lake house. It'll make refinancing easier for us, since technically it's under your name. It's just paperwork. I nearly laughed out loud. Oh, the deed, I said lightly. I'll have to look for it. I think it's somewhere safe. Her eyes flickered. Just a twitch, but I saw it. She didn't like that word, safe. Well, no rush, she said sweetly, forcing a smile. But the sooner the better. You know how banks are, I nodded. Of course, dear. The moment she left, I locked the door and sat down, my pulse racing. That safe downstairs, that document, it wasn't just leverage anymore. It was armor. That evening, Julia called again. Linda, I went through everything you sent. The documents your son and daughter-in-law made aren't just sloppy, they're fraudulent. But if you confront them now, they'll cover their tracks. We need to let them think you're oblivious. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. So I play along? Yes, she said. Let them think you're signing what they want. We'll prepare a counter-trust quietly in the meantime, one that reverses everything. Reverses everything, I repeated, tasting the words. For the first time in months, a strange calm washed over me. The fear was still there, but beneath it, something steadier had begun to grow. Resolve. Before bed, I walked to the mirror and looked at myself. Really looked. 62 years old. Wrinkles from laughter and worry. A face that had weathered grief and still woke up every day anyway. They thought they'd buried me under paperwork and polite lies. But I was my husband's wife, a numbers woman, a survivor. And when it came to protecting what was mine, my freedom, my dignity, my legacy, I was done playing the fool. There's a kind of silence that feels heavier than noise. The kind that sits in your chest like a stone, pressing down until you can barely breathe. That's what filled my kitchen the morning I found out the truth, the whole truth. It started with a phone call from Julia. Her tone was clipped, serious. Linda, I've gone through every document they filed. You might want to sit down? I did. My knees were already trembling. Go ahead, I said quietly. She sighed. They didn't just update your trust. They replaced it. They filed a completely new one, naming your son as the primary trustee and his wife as successor. Every asset, your home, your pension, the lake house, was legally transferred under their management. You still appear as the beneficiary, but you have no control. They did it all using digital authorization forms, your old signatures. For a long moment, I didn't say anything. I just stared at the tile floor, where the sunlight was cutting through the blinds. It looked warm, but I couldn't feel anything. So, I said finally, they own everything. Technically, no, Julia corrected softly. But practically, yes. They have access to everything tied to that trust. Your accounts, your deeds, your policies, my voice cracked. They used my name. Yes, they forged or repurposed your signature from that earlier authorization form. It's legal manipulation at its worst, predatory, deliberate. I can't believe your son went along with this. Neither could I, but deep down, I think I already knew. Evan had grown quieter lately, detached, and every time I tried to talk to him, he'd glance at Tessa like she was translating his thoughts for him. Julia's voice pulled me back. Linda, listen to me. This isn't hopeless. The old trust your husband made gives us a foundation. If we can prove coercion and digital fraud, we can void their version. But you have to stay calm. Act normal. Don't confront them yet. I nodded, though my hands were shaking. Okay. Keep every document, every message. I'll prepare a counter-trust. But you need to get evidence quietly. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, holding my phone like it was a weapon and a lifeline all at once. My mind was a blur of memories. Every helpful visit, every sweet smile, every "don't worry." Mom. It had all been a performance, and I'd been the audience. That evening, Evan stopped by, alone, for once. Hey, Mom, he said, dropping onto the couch. He looked tired, or maybe guilty. Sometimes they look the same. I forced a smile. Well, this is a surprise. No Tessa today? He rubbed the back of his neck. She's at home with Ethan. I just wanted to check in. You've been kind of distant lately. I raised an eyebrow. Have I? Yeah, he said. And Mom, look, I know you were upset about the bank thing, but everything we're doing is to make things easier for you. I promise. Easier, I repeated. That's what everyone says before they take something away. He frowned. What's that supposed to mean? I looked at him carefully. At the man I raised. The same boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms, who used to say, "Don't let the dark get me, Mom. Now," I could barely recognize him. It means, I said slowly, that trust goes both ways. Of course, he said a little too quickly. I smiled. Good. Then you won't mind if I ask to see a few documents. His face twitched. What kind of documents? Oh, you know, I said lightly. The ones with my name on them. He hesitated, just long enough to confirm everything Julia had told me. Mom, he said softly, Tessa handles all that. She keeps everything organized. It's complicated, I laughed, but it came out hollow. It's my life, Evan, not a spreadsheet. He stood abruptly. Look, I came here to talk, not argue. "You're taking this all the wrong way, am I?" I said. "Because it looks like you and your wife took everything I worked for and called it help." "Mom, don't." I stood, shaking. "Don't you dare call this protection. I buried your father with my own hands, and I managed this family's finances while you were still learning multiplication tables. I am not your burden." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He just stared at me, guilty, cornered, small. And for the first time in years, I realized my son was afraid of me. Good. He left without saying another word. Later that night, I got a text from Tessa. "Tessa, he didn't mean to upset you. You're overthinking again. Please, let us help you. We just want what's best for everyone." I stared at the screen, every word slicing deeper. Overthinking. It was always the same gaslighting. Soft, polished cruelty. Me. "Don't worry. I'll handle it," she replied with a heart emoji. If she only knew what that meant. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my desk, sorting papers, marking every irregularity, the missing pension statements, the rewritten trust, the altered mailing addresses. Each line was another cut, another betrayal. But then, halfway through a folder, I found something that stopped me cold. An email printout from Tessa's work computer. I remembered she'd once used my printer by mistake and forgotten to clear her drafts. At the top of the page, in bold, it read, "Subject, Trust Conversion Confirmation, from Tessa Brooks. To Evan Brooks. Once the trust clears, we'll start the property transfer. She won't even notice the change. The account consolidation went through this morning. There it was. In writing, proof. I felt something inside me snap. Not like breaking, but like a lock turning. For the first time since Mark died, I felt power return to my bones. I picked up my phone and called Julia. It was nearly midnight. She answered instantly. "Linda?" "I have proof," I said, my voice steady now. "Emails, bank changes." "All of it," she paused. "Good, then we move forward." "How?" "Quietly," she said. "We'll build your case brick by brick." "And Linda?" "Yes?" "Don't let them see you angry. Anger makes people cautious. You need them relaxed, overconfident. You need them to believe they've already won." I smiled into the dark. That shouldn't be a problem, because Tessa loved to gloat. And soon, I'd let her. And when she did, I'd be ready. The morning after I found those emails, I brewed my coffee slower than usual. Every motion, pouring water, stirring sugar, setting the spoon down, felt deliberate, controlled. Because control was what they thought I'd lost. But that was the beauty of being underestimated. You could move through rooms unnoticed, gathering the truth while they rehearsed their lies. So I started my quiet investigation. My first stop was the bank, not the big branch. Downtown, the one with glass walls and endless lines, but a smaller one, tucked behind the grocery store. I'd known the assistant manager, Carla, since Mark's days. She'd been a teller when he handled our mortgage. When she saw me, her face lit up. "Mrs. Brooks, haven't seen you in ages," I smiled. "Carla, I need a little help, but between us, please." She nodded immediately. I handed her a slip with the account number and whispered, "Can you tell me if any changes were made recently? Especially in access or beneficiaries." Carla's brow furrowed as she clicked through the system. After a moment, she exhaled slowly. "Well, there are quite a few updates. Looks like your son and daughter-in-law added themselves as co-trustees. The mailing address was changed last month to an office address in Evan's name. Office address. Of course, Tessa's doing. Can you print that for me?" I asked. She hesitated. "Technically, only the trustee can request records now." I forced a smile. "Of course. I wouldn't want you getting in trouble." But she glanced around, lowered her voice, and slid a small note across the counter. "I can't print it, but I can tell you this. Your balance has been moved into a joint investment account under the trust. If you need details, you didn't hear them from me." I squeezed her hand. "You didn't. Thank you, dear." I left the bank with my heart pounding. They hadn't just touched my money. They'd rearranged it, hidden it, tied it up in something I no longer controlled. Still, I smiled, because now I had another thread to pull. Next was the county records office. It smelled like dust and old paper, the scent of truth if you knew where to look. I asked the clerk for property deed updates under Brooks Linda. When she brought the file, I skimmed the first page and felt my stomach drop. The deed to my house had been transferred into the trust's ownership, filed with electronic authorization. The document listed my signature, only it wasn't mine. The loops were wrong. Too smooth, too clean. Whoever copied it had never spent 30 years signing paychecks by hand. I took a photo on my phone, pretending to check a message, then closed the folder gently. "Thank you," I said, smiling as if nothing were wrong. But as I walked out into the sun, I could feel the anger rise like heat under my skin. That house had been bought with my first promotion, with every late night and double shift I'd ever worked. And now it belonged to a trust that used my name as decoration. That evening I called Julia again. "I have proof from the bank and the county," I said, "and a copy of the forged signature." She exhaled, audibly impressed. "Good work, Linda. Keep collecting. I'll start drafting the counter trust and an injunction to freeze movement on your assets. But don't tip them off." "I won't," I promised. "And remember," she said, "they expect you to act confused." "Let them." So I did. For the next few weeks, I played the part they'd written for me, the forgetful, grateful mother. I let Tessa help me with bills, offered her cookies when she came by, asked harmless little questions like, "Now, dear, what's that login you said I keep forgetting?" Each time she grew bolder, more confident. Confidence breeds mistakes. One afternoon, while she was paying bills on her laptop at my dining table, she left the screen open to a financial dashboard, multiple accounts, mine included. I excused myself to the kitchen, phone in hand. Quietly, I snapped photos of the screen, account balances, routing numbers, fund transfers. When I came back, she was still typing, humming under her breath. I smiled sweetly. "You're such a blessing, Tessa. I don't know what I'd do without you." She looked up, proud. "Oh, Linda, that's what family's for." Later that night, I sat in my armchair and reviewed the photos. I'd found everything I needed. Transfers to new investment accounts, automatic withdrawals to a house improvement fund under Tessa's name, and a line item labeled consultation fee. She'd been paying herself with my money. The calm I felt then was something I hadn't known in years. It wasn't rage, it was precision. I wasn't just going to get back what they took. I was going to teach them exactly how it feels to underestimate a woman who built her life from spreadsheets and survival. A few days later, Tessa invited me over for dinner. The timing was perfect. I knew she wanted to gauge how much I suspected. Her kitchen smelled of rosemary and lemon. Evan poured wine, and they both looked so relaxed. "Mom," Tessa said as she plated food, "I wanted to ask if you've thought more about downsizing. Maybe move in with us? It'd be easier for everyone." "Easier," I said with a smile. "That's a word I've been hearing a lot lately." She laughed lightly. "Well, it's true. This place must be a lot to manage." I sipped my wine. "Maybe, but I've always liked my freedom. Hard to put a price on that." Evan glanced at Tessa, his jaw tightening. I could see the silent conversation between them. They thought I was resisting the inevitable. Good, because I already had a plan forming, one that involved more than resistance. It involved reversal. When I got home that night, I texted Julia one line, me. "Everything's ready. Time to build the counter trust." Her reply came a minute later. "Julia, good. When the time comes, they'll have no idea what hit them." I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Mark had always said, "Never start a fight you're not ready to finish." Well, this fight had started without me, but I'd be the one finishing it. Part 8. A Smile and a Plan. 890 words. Some women fight fire with fire. Others, like me, learn to fight it with silence, strategy, and a steady smile. By the time August rolled around, I had gathered enough evidence to sink a ship. Bank statements, screenshots, property filings, even that damning email Tessa had so carelessly printed. But evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed power. Legal, irreversible power. That's when Julia and I began building the counter trust. We met on a Thursday afternoon in her small office downtown. The air smelled faintly of old paper and coffee, and sunlight pooled across the oak desk between us. Julia leaned forward, her glasses low on her nose. "Here's how this will work, Linda. We'll file a revocation of the fraudulent trust under the grounds of duress and digital forgery." "But that's just part 1. Part 2?" I asked, Part 2 is what we'll quietly build in its place. A new trust. Your trust. We'll transfer your assets back piece by piece under this new umbrella. They'll think they still control everything, but in reality, you'll be the only trustee. I smiled slowly. So, while they believe I'm signing away control, I'm actually taking it back. Exactly. She passed me a pen. This document starts the process. It declares the fraudulent trust null and void, pending evidence. I took it, staring at the blank signature line. My hand trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer power of what this meant. The same hand they'd used to steal from me was now the one reclaiming everything. When I signed my name, the pen barely made a sound. Just the faint scratch of justice being written. For the next few weeks, I played my role like a seasoned actress. Tessa called constantly. Mom, don't worry about the bills this month. We've got it. Evan says the property taxes were confusing. We handled them. You should relax. Maybe take a little break from all the paperwork. Every word, every gesture was sugar-coated manipulation, and I gave her exactly what she wanted. Obedience. Oh, thank you, dear, I'd say. You and Evan are such a blessing. Or, I don't know what I'd do without you. If I'd been any sweeter, I'd have given her a cavity. Meanwhile, Julia and I were moving quietly in the background. Every Friday morning, I'd meet her at the courthouse annex. We filed the revocation notices, initiated title corrections, and redirected my pension payouts into the new trust, one registered under the Brooks Family Legacy Fund. With only one living trustee, me, one evening, I decided to test the waters. Tessa stopped by after work. Dressed in her usual sleek perfection, pearl earrings, cream blouse. Too much perfume. She glanced at the unopened mail on my table. Still not keeping up with your bills, I see, I smiled. Oh, I don't bother with those anymore. I trust you completely. Her eyes sparkled with triumph. That's the spirit. I gestured toward the sofa. Sit down, dear. Let's have some tea. I was just looking through some old papers of Mark's. Her expression tightened. Old papers? Yes, I said casually. You know, from before all this new digital nonsense. He always said physical copies were safer than computers. She forced a laugh. Well, times have changed. Maybe, I said, pouring her tea. But paper doesn't lie as easily as people do. Her hand froze midair. Teacup halfway to her lips. I let the silence hang for a moment, long enough for her to feel the weight of it, then smiled sweetly. How's little Ethan doing in school? Just like that, I'd given her no clear reason to panic, but enough reason to worry. That night, I sat at my desk and opened the safe again. The documents were still there. Mark's handwriting, my name, our history written in ink. I traced my finger over his signature. He'd always been the practical one. Prepare for the worst, he used to say, and you'll never fear it. Well, I was prepared now. By mid-September, everything was in place. Julia had filed the new trust, complete with notary stamps and digital authentication. My pension payments were rerouted. The house title was pending reassignment. The only thing left was the final step, one that required perfect timing. We planned it for October 5th, the day Tessa had scheduled a trust review meeting with her attorney friend, the same one who'd helped them forge the first documents. She wanted me to sign an update to my living arrangements. In other words, she was planning to move me out. I almost laughed when she told me. Of course, dear, I'd said sweetly. Just tell me when and where. I'm sure it's all for my benefit. The morning of the meeting, I dressed carefully. Navy suit, pearl earrings, my wedding ring polished until it caught the light. I looked in the mirror and smiled. For the first time in a long while, I didn't see a victim staring back. I saw a woman who'd been underestimated one too many times. When I arrived at their house, Tessa greeted me like a queen greeting her subject. Linda, you look lovely. Ready to get this all squared away? Absolutely, I said. I'm eager to finalize everything. Evan was there too, looking uncertain. He mumbled a greeting, avoiding my eyes. They ushered me to the dining table, where a neat stack of papers awaited. Tessa gestured to them proudly. These will just make things official. All you have to do is sign right there. I took the pen, holding it just above the page. You know, I said, my voice soft, I've been thinking about what you said, about safety, protection, convenience. She smiled, confident. I'm glad you understand. Oh, I understand, I said. I've made my own arrangements, actually. She blinked. What do you mean? I met with my lawyer. We've created a new trust, updated everything. Signed, notarized, authenticated. I brought copies if you'd like to see them. I slid a folder across the table. Inside, on top, was the new trust certificate bearing my name, and my name alone. Tessa's face went pale. Evan looked confused. Mom, what is this? I smiled. It's what happens when you teach a woman numbers and she remembers how to count. I didn't stay long. I didn't need to. As I left, I could feel Tessa's eyes burning into my back. She'd finally realized what had happened, how the strings she thought she was pulling had already been cut. And as I stepped out into the crisp October air, I couldn't help but whisper to myself, checkmate. When I got home from that meeting, I shut the door, leaned against it, and exhaled a laugh, half relief, half disbelief. I'd done it. For the first time in months, my life wasn't in their hands. It was back in mine, but now came the tricky part. I couldn't gloat, not yet. If Tessa smelled even a whiff of victory on me, she'd start digging. And the thing about people like her is, they don't stop digging until they hit something to destroy. So I went back to playing my part. The next few weeks were almost peaceful on the surface. Tessa called every few days, still syrup sweet. Just checking in, Mom. Did you get that new phone I recommended? The one that makes things easier? Evan said you've been looking tired lately. Maybe we should take you somewhere restful. She always said restful the same way you'd say out of the way. I smiled through every call, playing the part of the compliant, grateful mother. Thank you, dear. You're always thinking ahead. I'm fine, really. I've just been organizing some old files. Oh yes, I saw that email about the trust review. Everything looks perfect. The word perfect made her glow every time. She liked perfection, especially when she thought she'd built it. Meanwhile, Julia and I moved carefully behind the curtain. We finished transferring my assets into the new trust. The pension payments were secure. My accounts were rerouted. Even the lake house title, once trustee-controlled, now sat legally in my name. Julia called it poetic symmetry. I called it justice with paperwork. Then, one afternoon in late October, Carla, the teller from the bank, called me in secret. Mrs. Brooks, she whispered, I thought you should know. Tessa came in this morning asking about a large transfer from the trust account. When we told her it was frozen, she didn't take it well. My eyebrows lifted. Frozen? Yes, ma'am. The court hold went into effect yesterday from your lawyer's filing. Any movement requires your signature now. I smiled so wide my cheeks hurt. Thank you, Carla. That's good to hear. When I hung up, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the leaves drift down outside. It was finally happening. The unraveling. 2 days later, Tessa showed up at my doorstep, unannounced as usual, her heels clicking like gunfire against the porch. She didn't even bother with pleasantries this time. Linda, she said tightly, we need to talk. I gestured to the couch. Of course, dear, you look flustered. She sat, gripping her purse like it might explode. The bank made a mistake. They froze the trust account. Evan's paycheck withdrawal bounced. We need your authorization to fix it. I took a slow sip of tea. Oh, that must be stressful. It is, she snapped. Can you call your lawyer and have them remove the hold? It's ridiculous. My lawyer? I asked innocently. You mean Julia? Her eyes widened. You've been meeting with her? Oh, yes, I said pleasantly. We've had the most fascinating conversations about financial abuse laws and senior rights. Did you know they take these cases very seriously now? Apparently, it's become quite common for older adults to have their accounts mishandled. Her color drained. Linda, that's not what this is. No? I tilted my head. Because it certainly looks like it. She opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. Her usual composure faltered. For the first time since this began, she didn't have a script ready. I smiled kindly. Don't worry, dear. Everything's being handled properly now. You won't have to worry about a thing. That was Mark's favorite trick, using their own words against them. She stared at me for a long moment, her expression flickering between confusion and fury. Finally, she stood up abruptly. I'll talk to Evan. You do that. When she slammed the door behind her, I sat back, my hands shaking from the adrenaline. But under that tremor was something steadier, stronger. Satisfaction. That night, Evan called. "Mom," Tessa said, "you froze the accounts. What's going on?" "I didn't freeze anything," I said calmly. "The court did." "What court?" "The one handling the revocation filing." He went silent. I could hear him exhale sharply through the receiver. "Mom," he said finally, voice tight, "you didn't have to do that. We were trying to help you." "I know you think that," I said softly. "And maybe once I believed it too. But help isn't help when the person you're helping doesn't get a choice." He didn't respond. I could hear the TV murmuring faintly in the background. Then he said, almost whispering, "She told me it was just temporary, that it would protect you." "She lied, Evan," I said gently. "And now you know what that looks like." He didn't argue. He just hung up. Over the next week, everything started to fall apart for them. Tessa's real estate listing for the lake house vanished from the website. The mortgage refinance was denied due to ownership discrepancy. Her access to my online accounts disappeared completely, and yet I remained perfectly calm. I went to church. I baked pies for the fall festival. I waved to the neighbors. From the outside, I was still the same sweet, aging woman they'd underestimated. But inside, I was watching the empire they'd built on lies crumble, brick by brick. Then, one afternoon, the phone rang again. It was Julia. "It's official," she said. "The judge approved the revocation of the old trust and validated the new one. Everything is legally back under your sole name." I closed my eyes, letting the relief wash through me. "And the other side?" I asked. "They'll be notified tomorrow morning. Expect fireworks." I laughed quietly. "I'll make popcorn." That night, I stood by the fireplace, looking at the framed photos on the mantel. One of Mark and me at the lake house. Another of Evan as a boy, holding his first fish. My throat tightened. "Mark," I whispered, "you'd be proud of me." The flames flickered like an answer. I smiled. They thought I was too old to keep track. I took a sip of tea and looked out the window into the dark. "Turns out," I said softly, "I was just getting started." When Julia called the next morning, her voice carried that quiet tone lawyers use when they know something big is about to happen. "They've been served," she said. "Your son and daughter-in-law just received the official notice of revocation." I could picture it perfectly. The envelope sliding across their polished kitchen table, the moment Tessa's confident smile froze mid-air. "Well," I said, pouring my coffee, "I suppose it's time for breakfast." It didn't take long for the storm to arrive. By noon, Evan's car was in my driveway. The tires crunched the gravel like thunder. He didn't even knock, just walked in, face red, voice shaking. "Mom, what the hell did you do?" I looked up from my chair. "Good morning to you too." "You filed court papers. You froze our accounts, embarrassed us in front of our bank." "I corrected a fraud," I said calmly. He blinked. "A fraud? We were helping you." "By forging my signature? By moving my money? By trying to sell the house your father built?" His mouth opened, but no words came. He sat down hard, rubbing his temples. "Tessa said," I laughed softly. "Yes, Tessa says a lot, doesn't she?" That's when the front door opened again, sharp and loud. Tessa stepped in, perfectly put together as always, but her expression could have cracked glass. "Oh, good," I said. "The CEO of Family Theft, Inc. has arrived." She ignored the jab and walked right up to me. "You've made a huge mistake, Linda." "Have I?" "Yes," she snapped. "That trust protected you. Everything we did was for your benefit." "For my benefit," I repeated slowly. "You locked me out of my accounts, rewrote my deed, and paid yourself with my retirement funds?" Her jaw clenched. "You don't understand how finances work," I laughed, the sound sharp and bright. "Tessa, I was balancing corporate ledgers before you learned to type." Evan stood up, running a hand through his hair. "Everyone calm down." But I wasn't calm anymore. "Not this time." "You know what's funny?" I said, pulling a folder from the coffee table. "I tried so hard to believe you both were acting out of love. I told myself maybe I'd signed something by mistake. Maybe I was just tired. but I wasn't confused. I spread the papers out, emails, printouts, photographs. Tessa's eyes widened when she saw the one with her own email header. Once the trust clears, we'll start the property transfer. She won't even notice the change. Her voice came out shaky. Where did you get that? Oh, you left it on my printer, dear, right next to your fake concern. She lunged forward, trying to grab the paper, but I slid it away. Evan turned to her, face pale. You told me Mom agreed to that. She did, Tessa cried. She signed it. I looked him dead in the eyes. Did that signature look anything like this? I signed my name neatly on a scrap of paper. Sharp, tight, accountant precise. Because whoever forged the one you filed doesn't know I loop my L the other way. He stared at it, realization dawning slow and heavy. Evan, I said softly, I raised you better than this. He sank back onto the couch, head in his hands, but Tessa wasn't done. People like her never are. She straightened her blouse, regained that brittle composure, and smirked. Even if that's true, no one's going to believe you. You're an old woman. You trusted us. It'll look like confusion. I smiled, almost pitying her. Maybe, but confusion doesn't come with notarized timestamps. Her smirk faltered. Every document you filed, I continued, was logged electronically. The court already has metadata proving the signatures were lifted from another form. You didn't just manipulate an old woman, you committed digital forgery. Evan looked up sharply. Tessa, please tell me she's lying. But her silence said everything. The knock on the door was almost poetic. Julia stepped in, carrying a briefcase and a calm that could cut through chaos. Good afternoon, she said evenly. I see everyone's here. Tessa took a step back. What is she doing here? Just delivering a few documents, Julia said, handing me a folder. The judge has reviewed the evidence and issued a temporary protective order. All accounts and properties are now under Linda Brooks's sole control until the investigation concludes. Tessa's face drained of color. And, Julia added with a slight smile, given the proof of forgery, your attorney will be contacted by law enforcement regarding a criminal inquiry. Evan looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. Mom, I didn't know. I believed him, and that almost made it worse. You didn't want to know, I said quietly. That's what hurts. Tessa found her voice again, brittle and trembling. You can't just take everything back. Julia closed her briefcase. Actually, she already did. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint ticking of the mantel clock. Then I looked at Tessa, really looked at her. The woman who'd smiled in my kitchen, who'd called me Mom while plotting to erase me. You know, I said softly, you might have gotten away with it if you hadn't been so proud. You couldn't resist showing off, could you? Always telling me how much easier life would be if I let go. Her eyes glistened, fury and fear tangled together. You ruined us. No, I said, standing tall. You ruined yourself. When they left, the silence that followed felt different, cleaner. I turned to Julia. You think that's the last I'll see of them? Legally? Maybe. Emotionally? Probably not. But the law's on your side now. I nodded, my voice low. Then let the law do its work. She smiled faintly. You handled yourself beautifully, Linda. Remind me never to get on your bad side. I laughed softly, for real this time. I'm too old for revenge. I prefer accountability. That night, I sat on the porch under the early November sky. The air smelled like rain and endings. I thought of Mark, of the calm strength he'd always carried. I could almost hear him say, "Told you, sweetheart." Let them think they've won, then show them who's counting. I smiled at the stars and whispered, lesson learned. Inside, my phone buzzed, a message from Julia. They've withdrawn the sale request. The house is officially yours again. Congratulations. I turned off the porch light and went inside, a quiet satisfaction settling in my bones. The tables weren't just turned. They were flipped, bolted, and locked in place. I always thought courtrooms would feel cold and sterile, like the ones you see on TV. But the one I sat in that morning was warm, almost too warm. Maybe it was the weight of truth pressing down on everyone in that room. The seal of the state of Missouri gleamed behind the judge's bench. The air buzzed with quiet tension. Evan sat at one table with his lawyer, pale and restless. Tessa sat beside him, perfect as ever on the outside, hair smooth, blouse crisp, but her hands kept clenching the edge of the table, and I sat across from them. My heart steady, my hands folded neatly on my lap. After months of fear, confusion, and pretending to be weak, I finally had a voice again. The bailiff called the session to order, and the judge, an older woman with eyes sharp as glass, looked over the files. "Mrs. Brooks," she said to me, "I understand you've petitioned for revocation of a fraudulent trust and restoration of personal assets." "Yes, Your Honor," I said clearly. "My son and his wife filed documents transferring my estate into their control without my full consent or comprehension of what I was signing. They exploited my trust and my age." The judge nodded. "And you have representation?" "Yes, ma'am." Julia stood beside me, calm and composed. "Your Honor, we've provided evidence of signature forgery, unauthorized digital filings, and bank records reflecting misappropriated funds." The opposing lawyer, a slick man in a gray suit, rose quickly. "Your Honor, this is a misunderstanding. My clients acted in the petitioner's best interest. The intent was purely protective." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Protective? By removing her access to her own accounts?" He cleared his throat. "Mrs. Brooks has a history of," Julia cut him off, "of financial expertise. She was a certified accountant for 30 years. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. I almost smiled. Then the judge turned to Tessa. "Mrs. Brooks, is it true you initiated the trust paperwork on behalf of your mother-in-law?" Tessa straightened. "Yes, Your Honor, but only because she asked us to help manage things. She was struggling to keep track of—" "Struggling?" I interrupted, my voice quiet but steady. "Would you remind the court which day I supposedly asked for your help?" Tessa hesitated. Well, I don't recall the exact date." Julia stepped forward. "Your Honor, I'd like to introduce Exhibit C, an email from the respondent to her husband, dated 2 weeks prior to the creation of the trust." She handed it over. The judge read silently, then glanced up, her expression unreadable. "Once the trust clears, we'll start the property transfer. She won't even notice the change." The room went still. Tessa's lawyer shot her a panicked look. "Mrs. Brooks," the judge said slowly, "you sent this?" Tessa's face flushed crimson. That was taken out of context. It was just about taking control of your mother-in-law's estate without her knowledge?" She sputtered. "No. She told us to." The judge raised a hand. "Enough." Then she turned to Evan. "And you, Mr. Brooks, did you participate in the financial transfers?" Evan swallowed hard. "Your Honor, I signed the forms, but I didn't understand what Tessa was doing. I thought it was all legitimate." The judge's eyes softened, but only slightly. "Ignorance of fraud doesn't excuse participation in it." He nodded miserably. Julia stood again. "Your Honor, if I may, we have one final exhibit. A notarized record of the petitioner's original trust, drafted by her late husband 10 years ago. It clearly designates her as the sole and permanent trustee of all marital assets. This document, along with corroborating digital timestamps, proves that any subsequent transfer would have required her direct authorization that was forged." The judge read through the document carefully, then leaned back. "Mrs. Brooks," she said, looking at me, "would you like to say anything before I issue my decision?" I stood slowly. My knees creaked, but my voice was clear. "Yes, Your Honor." I turned to face my son and his wife. For a moment, I didn't see adults in front of me. I saw the little boy I once held after nightmares, and the young woman who used to call me Mom while pouring me coffee. "I believed love meant trust," I said softly. "I thought letting family help was a blessing. But what I learned is that trust without respect is just a trap waiting to close." Tessa looked away. Evan's eyes brimmed with tears. "I don't hate you," I continued, "but I won't let you take from me what I've spent a lifetime building. Not my house, not my freedom, and not my dignity." When I sat down, the room was utterly silent. The judge nodded once, slow and deliberate. "Beautifully said, Mrs. Brooks." She shuffled her papers, then looked at the defendants. "Given the overwhelming evidence of manipulation, forgery, and exploitation, I hereby rule in favor of the petitioner, Linda Brooks. The fraudulent trust is voided. All assets, properties, and financial accounts are to be returned to her immediate control. A sharp inhale rippled through the courtroom. But she wasn't done. As for the respondents, the judge added, eyes locking on Tessa, the evidence of forgery will be forwarded to the county prosecutor for review. I suggest you obtain criminal counsel. Tessa's face drained of all color. Evan turned to her, disbelief and betrayal written across his face. You said it was safe, he whispered. She didn't answer. When the gavel fell, it echoed through my bones. Not as a sound of victory, but of release. Julia touched my arm gently. It's over. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. No, I said quietly. It's finished. Outside the courthouse, the air felt brighter. The sky stretched wide and blue above the marble steps. Reporters lingered nearby, cameras slung over shoulders, waiting for the next big headline. One of them approached. Mrs. Brooks, would you be willing to share your story for our senior safety segment? I smiled faintly. Maybe one day, but not today, because right then, I didn't need an audience. I'd already told my story where it mattered. As Julia and I walked toward her car, I looked back once more at the courthouse doors. Evan was standing there watching me. Our eyes met. He mouthed, I'm sorry. I gave him a small nod. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it, because the truth had already spoken for me. And sometimes that's enough. It's strange how quiet freedom sounds. After the court ruling, my house felt different, lighter, like the walls themselves were exhaling with me. For the first few days, I moved through the rooms slowly, touching things I hadn't really seen in months. The old wooden banister Mark polished every spring, the kitchen window that faced the garden, the bookshelf that still smelled faintly of his aftershave. Everything that had been mine, my life, my history, was mine again. But this time, I didn't take it for granted. Julia stopped by that week with a bottle of wine and her warm, knowing smile. Well, she said, raising her glass, to the sharpest 62-year-old accountant Missouri's ever seen. I laughed. You just like being right, she grinned. I do. But I also like seeing justice win for once. We sat on the porch, sipping slowly as dusk softened the edges of the world. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt like I was living. Julia, I said after a while, I don't know what I would have done without you. She waved it off. You would have found your way. You always do. But I wasn't so sure. There'd been nights I'd almost believed Tessa's voice in my head. That maybe I was too old to keep track. That maybe I had lost a step. Now I knew better. Age doesn't make you weak. It just makes you quieter about your strength. The news of the case spread faster than I expected. The local paper ran a small feature, Retired Woman Reclaims Assets After Family Exploitation. They didn't use our full names, but everyone in town knew. At first, I was embarrassed. Then something unexpected happened. Letters started arriving, from widows, from retirees, from people my age who'd been told they were too old, too slow, too trusting. One woman wrote, I didn't even realize what my daughter had done until I read about you. You gave me the courage to look. That letter made me cry. I realized this wasn't just my story. It was a warning and a light for people like me. A week later, Evan came to see me, alone. He looked thinner, older somehow. Guilt ages a man faster than time. Hi, Mom, he said softly, standing on the porch with his hands in his pockets. I didn't invite him in right away. We just stood there, the air between us heavy with things unsaid. Then I stepped aside. Come in. He sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Tessa had once made me sign those papers. I'm sorry, he said, voice breaking. I was stupid. I let her talk me into everything. I thought she was helping us, helping you. But she... He stopped, swallowing hard. I should have seen it. You should have, I said honestly. He nodded. I know. We sat in silence for a while. Then he looked up, eyes glassy. Do you hate me? I shook my head. No, Evan, I hate what you did. But you're still my son. Tears spilled down his cheeks. He whispered, I lost everything. The house, the accounts. Tessa left. I reached across the table, taking his hand. Maybe that's not such a loss. He gave a bitter laugh. Maybe not. For the first time, I saw not the manipulative husband of Tessa, but the little boy I used to chase through the yard. Scraped knees and all. Mom, he said quietly, I don't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not yet, I said gently. But you can earn it. He nodded, and for the first time in months, I saw a flicker of the man I raised, humble, ashamed, and ready to rebuild. That night, after he left, I walked out to the garden. The air smelled of rain and lilacs. I tilted my head back and looked up at the stars, the same ones Mark used to point out to me, his arm draped over my shoulders. I did it, sweetheart, I whispered. You were right. Patience beats pride. The wind stirred the branches, almost like an answer. The next morning, I went to the local senior center and asked to volunteer for their new financial awareness program. The director smiled wide when I explained my background. By the following month, I was teaching a weekly workshop called Know Your Worth. Every Thursday, a dozen women and men sat in folding chairs, notebooks in hand, as I told them what no one had ever told me in time. Never let anyone convince you your mind's too old for your money. Every session ended the same way, me holding up a simple piece of advice written on a card. Trust is a gift. Don't give it as collateral. They always applauded, some with tears, some with that same fierce pride I'd come to feel myself. Life moved forward, slow and steady. The garden bloomed again. The house filled with laughter when little Ethan visited on weekends. Evan brought him often now, quietly rebuilding the bridge his wife had burned. Sometimes, we'd sit by the lake house watching the sunlight ripple across the water. Evan once said softly, "She almost took this from you." I smiled. "No, son. She just reminded me how much it was worth. It's been 6 months since the trial. The world hasn't changed much. The same small-town quiet, the same morning coffee, the same creak in my knees when it rains. But I've changed. People call it survival. I call it awakening, when you lose everything you thought made you safe. Your home, your security, your faith in family. You start to see what's real. And what's real is this. They can steal your signature, your savings, your trust. But they can't steal your sense of self. That's the part they never counted on. A small production company reached out recently, a documentary series on elder rights. The producer, a kind young woman named Maya, asked if I'd share my story. "We want to help others recognize the signs before it's too late," she said. I hesitated at first, but then I remembered those letters, the women who said my story gave them courage, so I agreed. The filming took place at my lake house. I wore a soft blue sweater, Mark's favorite. The crew set up near the window, the light pouring in golden and calm. When the camera rolled, Maya asked, "If you could say one thing to people your age watching this, what would it be?" I looked straight into the lens, into the eyes of every person who'd ever been told they were too old to fight back. I'd say this: don't confuse kindness for blindness. Don't confuse love for surrender. And never let anyone convince you that growing older means growing weaker. I paused, letting the words settle. Because age doesn't dull your strength. It just hides it in places only wisdom knows how to find. Maya's eyes shimmered. "That's beautiful," I smiled. "It's the truth." The episode aired a month later. The response was overwhelming. Letters, calls, messages from across the country. People thanking me, asking how to get help, how to start over. It wasn't fame I felt. It was peace. Mark would have called it a full circle. On the anniversary of his passing, I drove to the lake house alone. The water was still, the sky painted in soft shades of amber and violet. I spread wildflowers along the dock, whispered a prayer, and watched them drift away. "Thank you," I murmured, "for teaching me how to fight quietly, for reminding me that strength doesn't shout, it endures." The breeze rippled across the lake, gentle and certain, and for a moment, I could almost feel his hand in mine again. As I walked back up the path, I thought about everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained. Trust had been broken, yes, but what replaced it was stronger. Clarity, independence, and a kind of peace that comes only from surviving what was meant to silence you. When I got home that evening, I sat by the window, tea in hand, and began to write my story in my own words. Not for pity, for preservation, because one day, when little Ethan is old enough, I'll hand him that story. And I'll tell him, your grandmother once lost everything, and then learned she didn't need anyone's permission to take it back. Sometimes, when I walk through my house now, I can still hear Tessa's voice echoing faintly in my memory. We'll handle your finances now. You're too old to keep track. I smile every time because the woman she tried to erase now owns everything again, not just the deeds or the digits, but her dignity, and that, more than money, is the kind of wealth no one can ever steal. If you've ever been made to feel small, remember this: they may take your name off the paper. They may try to turn your kindness into currency. But as long as you still know who you are, you've already won. I'm Linda Brooks. They took my trust once. Now the word belongs to me again.